My insane mother-in-law took my newborn baby from me and gave him to my sister-in-law without my knowledge. I just found out how she did it, and I'm this close to making a decision that would land me 25 to life. My mother-in-law is completely out of her mind. Without telling me a damn thing, she took my newborn son and handed him over to my sister-in-law like it was nothing. I just recently pieced together how she pulled it off, and let me tell you, I'm this close to making a decision that could cost me the next 25 years of my life behind bars. Right now, I need someone, anyone, to tell me I'm not going insane. I left everything behind for Dan 3 years ago. From the start, his mother, Linda, made it clear she despised me. I mean real hate, the kind where she'd accidentally mess up my name on holiday cards or introduce me at events as just some friend of Dan's. Every single family dinner felt like slow torture. Linda would spend those meals fawning all over Ashley, who's married to Dan's brother-in-law, Jason. It didn't matter what I did, Linda made sure I felt invisible. Dan tried to defend me, but it was obvious he'd emotionally checked out. After those dinners, he'd come home and just hold me in silence. I figured things might get better once I got pregnant. When I showed Dan the test, he cried. He was over the moon. 2 days later, Jason and Ashley dropped their own baby news. And I swear to you, Linda's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Ashley went all out with her baby shower, ice sculptures, decorations, the works. I got a cheap greeting card from a dollar store, and the music didn't even play because the battery was dead. Ashley ended up having her baby while Jason was off at work. Here's where it gets weird. Linda, the woman who used to live stream her grocery runs, didn't post a single picture of her first grandchild. She stayed totally silent. That's not like her. The day before my due date, Linda showed up with some so-called herbal tea, claiming it would help with fertility and make labor easier. I drank it just to be polite, but a few hours later, everything went into overdrive. Labor hit me like a truck. I blacked out during the emergency C-section, and when I came to, Linda was there, pretending to be all concerned and caring. She offered to help with the baby since we'd be staying at her place. Dan had a gut feeling something wasn't right, but I was just so overwhelmed, and honestly, I was grateful for the help. She started showing up every day with more of that tea, saying it would help me heal. Thing is, every time I drank it, I felt more and more drained. Our baby, Cody, was sick from the get-go. Constant crying, feeding issues, we couldn't figure it out. Linda slowly moved in with us, acting like we couldn't survive without her. She told everyone she was stepping in because our son had special needs. During the day, she took over and played the role of the devoted grandma on social media, while I handled the actual care, doctor visits, feedings, everything. And the whole time, she couldn't stop talking about how great Ashley's baby was. Then she started trashing me, telling the family I was overwhelmed and not cut out for motherhood. Dan was working 70-hour weeks just to keep us afloat, and every night he came home to find me completely wrecked. Cody just kept getting sicker. At one point, I suggested we run some genetic tests. Linda flipped out. She accused me of trying to find an excuse to abandon my own child. She demanded we switch doctors immediately. When I refused, she threatened to tell Dan I was faking another pregnancy. Dan walked in right as we were yelling, and Linda turned on the waterworks, accusing me of attacking her. For the first time, I saw doubt in Dan's eyes, like he wasn't sure who I was anymore. I went ahead with the genetic tests anyway, and I cut back on the weird tea. When the results came back, they confirmed Cody had a rare genetic disorder. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a failure. I finally felt like a mother who was doing her best for a sick child. Dan apologized. We started to rebuild, united by our love for Cody. Then came another family dinner. I explained Cody's condition and the treatment plan in front of everyone. Ashley tried to change the subject, and I noticed Linda gripping her wine glass like it might shatter. Then she pulled out a damn folder, and my stomach dropped. Inside was a twisted portfolio, photos of our messy house, audio recordings of me sounding out of it, and statements from neighbors claiming I was unstable. Linda announced she was filing for emergency custody of Cody for his own protection. Some of the family looked like they believed her. Dan stood up for me, but then Linda played a recording where I sounded drugged, muttering nonsense. Even Dan looked shaken. That night, I remembered something odd from Cody's DNA report, something about the parental markers not quite matching. I asked for a deeper analysis, and when the new results came in, the world stopped spinning for a moment. Cody wasn't my biological son, and he only shared 25% DNA with Dan. I didn't say a word to anyone, not even to Dan. After months of emotional manipulation, I didn't know who to trust anymore. I called a family meeting and told everyone to be there. Dan didn't know what was going on, but he had my back. Linda showed up with that smug look, probably expecting me to praise her for something. When everyone was seated, I stood up and dropped the DNA results right in the middle of the room. Chaos erupted. Dan looked at me, then at his mom, and pure terror washed over his face. Linda clutched her chest and collapsed. At the hospital, she thought she was dying, and that's when she finally confessed. Turns out, Ashley's baby was born with the same genetic disease as Cody. Linda panicked about how that would make the family look. So she slipped me something to trigger early labor, and while I was unconscious, she swapped the babies. That herbal tea she kept giving me? It was laced with sedatives meant to keep me confused and slow. The whole family was horrified. Dan and I rushed to Jason and Ashley's house to get our real son back. But Ashley wouldn't even open the door. She screamed that she wasn't giving the baby up. She kept saying things like, "We should leave it alone," and "I'm already bonded to this healthy baby." We immediately got lawyers involved. While we sat in that conference room, waiting for legal advice, Dan held my hand so tight his knuckles turned white. The lead attorney spread the documents out on the table, explaining custody laws and past legal cases. I looked down at my phone. 2 photos stared back at me, one baby I'd raised but wasn't mine, and one who was mine but I never got to hold. Dan tried calling Jason again, 5 times, and each one went to voicemail. We drove back to their house with our lawyer's assistant. Ashley's car was gone. The driveway was empty. Curtains drawn tight. No one came to the door when we knocked. The neighbor's dog Walker, yeah, really, told us she saw Ashley and Jason packing up suitcases early that morning. Not exactly solid intel, but at that point, we were grasping at anything. Our lawyer was calling every few hours with updates. They'd already filed criminal cases about the custody mess in 3 different jurisdictions, since we didn't know for sure where Ashley and Jason had gone. Meanwhile, Dan was pacing back and forth across our living room, practically wearing a groove into the carpet. I just sat there on the couch, holding Cody, except he wasn't really Cody, and trying to soothe his pain from the genetic disorder he'd been battling since day 1. Linda had been moved from the ER to a regular room. Her doctor told us the heart scare wasn't a full-blown attack, just stress. Of course. Aunt Dana called to say Linda was already changing her story, now blaming the drugs for confusing her, saying she wanted to speak with her lawyer before saying anything else. I changed Cody's diaper again, it felt like the 1000th time. At that point, my hands were moving on autopilot. He wasn't mine, not biologically. But he only knew me as his mom. And I knew every single cry, every expression, every little twitch of pain in his face. My chest felt like it was going to split open as I watched him struggle to breathe, his nose completely stuffed up thanks to the condition he inherited. Dana's phone kept buzzing with calls. Family members who'd heard Linda's confession were calling, some with questions, others with wild theories. One of Dan's cousins had managed to record part of the hospital confession on her phone before staff kicked everyone out. At least we had that. Dana's uncle, a retired cop, recommended a private investigator, someone who specialized in custody cases. The PI met with us that evening. He took detailed notes while we laid out the whole ugly story. He asked for anything that might help track Ashley and Jason, credit card numbers, call logs, anything. Dan suddenly remembered Jason talking once about an old family-owned orphanage up in the mountains. The detective jotted it down as a possible lead. I stood by the freezer, sorting through bags of pumped milk I'd labeled carefully, not even knowing which baby I was saving it for anymore. That night, around 2 a.m., Dan found me sobbing next to the breast pump. I broke down, saying I'd failed both children. The one I'd raised, who was so sick, and the one I hadn't even met yet, the one who was healthy. He just held me while I cried. The next morning, our lawyers called again. They'd managed to get an emergency custody order, but it was only valid in our state. If Ashley had crossed state lines, we'd need federal help. But the FBI wasn't going to step in unless there was clear evidence of kidnapping, and that was tricky, since Ashley technically had her own biological child, even if she got him through deception. Then Linda's lawyer reached out. She said Linda was willing to testify about the baby swap, on one condition: immunity from prosecution. Our lawyers shut that down immediately. If we gave her immunity, we'd lose any leverage we had. We had to press charges if we wanted any real shot at getting our son back quickly. Right then, the PI called. He traced Jason's credit card to a gas station just a few hours away. They were headed toward Florida, where Jason's parents lived. We threw our bags together and hit the road while the lawyers scrambled to file emergency custody requests in the states along the route. That night, Cody had another terrible episode. His breathing was so shallow, I nearly called for an ambulance. Dan held him upright against his chest. Oddly, that was the only position that gave him some relief. I watched my husband cradle a child who wasn't even his by blood, while the baby who was his, and mine, was out there somewhere in a car with people who'd lied to us. The next morning we sat down with prosecutors. They took our statements, reviewed our evidence. Even with Linda's recorded confession, it might not hold up if she stuck to her story about being drugged and confused. The DNA tests helped, but they weren't enough by themselves. We needed medical records from both births. But when we asked the hospitals for the documents, the admin teams pushed back. They claimed privacy issues, said there were ongoing internal investigations. Their legal departments got involved and dragged their feet. Our lawyer finally had to threaten to involve the police. After that, they promised to consider the request. Bureaucracy was moving at a crawl, and every hour felt like we were losing more time. Then, finally, Dan's brother Jason picked up the phone. He sounded tired. On edge. He said Ashley was a mess, convinced we were trying to take her baby away. He claimed Linda must have been confused in the hospital, and said there was no way any baby swap happened. Dan lost it. He yelled about the DNA results, but Jason just hung up. Later, I caught myself looking at Cody, trying to see Ashley in his features. His nose looked like hers. His eyes were brown like Jason's. Mine are green. Dan's are blue. How had I missed it? But honestly, Linda's toxic behavior had clouded everything. I felt ashamed that I hadn't seen the truth sooner. The PI found them staying at a hotel near Jacksonville. Local police wouldn't intervene without the right paperwork. Our lawyers scrambled to file suit in Florida. I wanted to fly there that second, but our attorney warned that showing up might be seen as harassment and could damage our case. Meanwhile, Linda got discharged from the hospital and went straight to her lawyer's office. She wasn't done. According to Aunt Dana, Linda was now telling people that I faked the DNA test because I couldn't handle raising a sick child. Some relatives, those who hadn't heard her hospital confession, actually started believing her. We hired another law firm in Florida to handle local legal hurdles. The bills were stacking up fast, but Dan said he'd sell everything we owned if that's what it took. His company gave him emergency leave so he could focus on the case. We were completely consumed, by the search, by the legal chaos, by the fear. Then Child Protective Services knocked on our door. Someone had filed a report questioning whether we were capable of caring for Cody. A social worker inspected the house, looked through his medical records. She didn't find anything wrong but said, given the unusual circumstances, they need to keep an eye on us. I knew exactly who had made the call. It had Linda written all over it. Later that day, our Florida lawyer called again. This time, the news was devastating. Ashley had hired her own lawyer. She'd filed a formal petition for adoption, claiming that we had abandoned our biological child. And the worst part? Since we never legally had custody of our own son, the situation was far more complicated than anyone expected. The judges in Florida were hesitant to take real action. Without solid proof that the child was in direct danger, they wouldn't authorize a full intervention. I spent hours combing through similar cases online, and most of them dragged on for years. Some parents never got their children back. The justice system isn't built to handle crimes rooted in manipulation instead of violence. And Linda? She played the long game, twisting our love and trust into weapons. She built a perfect little nightmare out of loyalty and lies. Dan completely broke down after reading a story where the biological parents lost custody because the courts prioritized the emotional bond between the child and the people raising him. He blamed himself. Said he should have protected me from his mother. I held him while he cried, both of us running on fumes, grief, rage, fear, all tangled up together. Then the prosecutor called. They needed more info, details about Linda's behavior before the swap. They were building a timeline. Suddenly, I started remembering things, every offhand comment, every time my gut told me something was off and I brushed it aside. Like how Linda insisted on being in the delivery room with Ashley but wanted nothing to do with mine. How she pushed for certain doctors and hospitals. All of it clicked. It was like watching puzzle pieces fall into place, pieces I didn't know were missing. Meanwhile, we were still caring for Cody, giving him his medication, helping him through his breathing treatments, tracking his symptoms. He needed round-the-clock care. We had charts, routines, appointments. Ashley had none of that. Our real son, our healthy son, was likely being treated like any other normal baby. No special formula, no breathing checks, no doctors monitoring symptoms. Just blissful ignorance. That thought crushed me. Then, the next morning, something hit me like a punch to the gut. Ashley posted on social media, smiling photos, filtered perfection. She called him her perfect little boy. Dozens of pictures. He was dressed to the nines, surrounded by toys, fat-cheeked and content in her arms. The comments were flooded with hearts and congratulations. No one had a clue that she was posting pictures of my biological son, while I was home struggling to keep hers alive. Dan was the one who found the post. His hands were shaking as he handed me the phone. She even wrote about his big appetite and amazing health. Of course she didn't know about the genetic disease running through her own family line. Linda made sure she didn't. Then the investigator called. Jason had just withdrawn a large amount of money from one of their shared accounts. The PI also found out they'd been researching international flights to countries with no extradition treaties. Our window was closing fast. The investigator urged us to act immediately. He helped us file paperwork to freeze their accounts and notified border control to prevent international travel. We were running out of time. Cody had another rough night. His breathing got so bad I thought we'd have to call an ambulance again. Dan held him upright on his chest, only position that gave him some relief. And there we were, two exhausted parents comforting a child that wasn't ours by blood, while our biological son was being paraded around like a trophy on social media. The Florida lawyer managed to schedule an emergency hearing. But Ashley's legal team pulled another trick. They filed for a delay, claiming we needed more paternity testing, even though we already had official DNA results. Every delay worked in their favor. The longer this dragged out, the more Ashley could claim emotional attachment. Linda wasn't sitting still either. She was spinning her own narrative, telling families she had postpartum psychosis and had imagined the whole baby swap. Said I had faked the DNA tests. Accused me of being unstable since childbirth. Some relatives, ones who always liked Linda, started to doubt us. The prosecutor called again, this time with bad news. The hospital's internal investigation came up with nothing. Key staff members had either retired or been mysteriously transferred. Without their testimony, proving the swap was going to be a lot harder. Dan's job started breathing down his neck. His emergency leave was ending, and we couldn't afford for him to lose his position, not with the legal bills piling up. He started working remotely during the day while I managed Cody's care and fielded endless calls with attorneys. We were unraveling under the pressure. Then, finally, Ashley slipped up. She took the baby, our son, to a pediatrician in Florida for what she thought was just a routine checkup. The doctor noticed early signs of the genetic condition and ordered tests. Ashley panicked. She left the appointment before the results came back. But that was it. We had medical documentation now. Concrete evidence that this child needed real care, and that he was showing symptoms. Our investigator used that info to trace their steps. They had moved out of the hotel and were staying with friends in Georgia. The kicker? The friends had no idea what was going on. They posted group photos online, accidentally revealing their location. It was a rare win. But of course, Ashley's lawyer filed for another delay in Florida, this time claiming Ashley was having complications from a childhood illness. It was a lie, but we couldn't prove it without breaching privacy laws. So we lost another week while our child stayed with people who had no idea how to care for him. Linda ramped up her attacks. She filed a complaint with Dan's company, claiming he was harassing her. She spread rumors to her neighbors, saying we were dangerous, unstable. And when that didn't work, she turned to my side of the family, calling them with stories about my supposed mental breakdowns. Child services came knocking again. This time they said they were concerned about our mental health, about whether we were emotionally fit to care for Cody. It was insane. We later traced those complaints to Linda's lawyer's office, using their own IP address. She was actively working to destroy us from the inside out. Finally, our Florida attorney got us a new court date. But right away, Ashley's team claimed we were the ones stalking them. They submitted photos of our car parked near their temporary home, accusing us of sending people to follow them. The judge ordered a pause on everything. Meanwhile, Cody's health was declining faster than expected. He needed a specialist, urgently, but the earliest appointment was weeks away. The doctor wrote a letter explaining that his condition required consistent and professional monitoring, or things could get worse. Dan's mental health was tanking too. He wasn't sleeping, barely eating, constantly wired. Then, out of nowhere, a nurse from the hospital reached out, anonymously. She remembered something from the night of the delivery. Said Linda had been acting strange. That she'd spent hours in the nursery, even though hospital policy didn't allow visitors to linger like that. At the time, the nurse didn't think much of it. But now, it could mean everything. The nurse was terrified of losing her job, but she agreed to meet with our lawyer. She brought with her a security card that showed that Linda repeatedly entered the guarded zones that night. She also remembered that Linda brought gifts for the nursing staff, coffee and cookies that seemed to be stolen from her. Ashley published another update in social media, this time asking for legal advice without giving details. The comments were supportive, offering help and sympathy. She built a narrative in which she was a victim by putting public opinion to her advantage before the truth came out. Linda's lawyer sent a letter asking us to stop blackmailing her with false accusations. Our lawyer said that it was a tactic of intimidation, but the threats still didn't let me sleep at night. The hospital suddenly announced a change of policy regarding the security in the cage and access for visitors. They did not admit to the crime, but the moment was suspicious. Our lawyer said that it was proof that they knew that something was wrong with the cage. Dan confronted his aunt, who was Linda's closest relative. After hours of pressure, she admitted that Linda had been planning something for months. She was fascinated by the reputation of the family, and was terrified of her granddaughter with a genetic disease. We received a message informing us that Ashley and Jason had put a child in a cage in Georgia under a slightly different name. They settled down, creating a paper trail that showed stability and concern. Every next day he made it harder to prove our situation. The prosecutor called with mixed messages. They built the case, but needed more evidence. Linda's testimony was problematic because she denied it. The nurse's testimony helped, but not enough. They suggested that we focus on the family case while they continued the criminal case. Cody had the worst night so far. We got to the emergency room and the nurse made a scene saying she wanted to help her grandson. Dan looked like he was going to explode. Our savings were almost exhausted. Between the lawyer's fees, income and medical bills we were drowning. The nurse offered help, but Linda denied it. She believed the stress broke us both. We flew to Florida leaving Cody with a specialist nurse. Ashley and Jason looked surreal. Ashley held my biological son as if he was her most precious treasure. Our lawyer presented a picture of parents who took care of their child from birth. They showed a picture of a child's room decorated with children's books. Our lawyer presented DNA evidence and Linda's testimony, but Ashley's lawyer argued that we forced an elderly woman to be manipulated. They asked for tests that would take a week, but we didn't have any. The judge seemed compassionate but careful. She ordered an immediate start of supervised visits while she was looking at the evidence. It was a painful step. We had 2 hours twice a week with our biological son while Ashley was looking at the evidence. Presented a picture who took care of their child from birth.